What's up, YouTube? Sturke here. In this video, we're going to cover the very best Apex Legends settings. You might think they're just settings, but a lot of these actually impact your performance and your ability to perform in the game. So we're going to cover every single thing and kind of what they do for you and let you make your own decisions from there. I'm going to show you what I do and why, and we're going to walk through all of that. Please make sure you guys like and subscribe to the channel for more. We go live almost daily on YouTube. All right, let's get into it. So there are a handful of settings in Apex Legends that will actually impact your ability to perform. And we're going to kind of walk through all of those. And I'm going to try my best to explain everything to you and why these are the best settings. And you're free to make your own decisions from there. So a couple of the basic ones I want to get out of the way, but these are very impactful. I don't think most people know this. If you go to your gameplay tab, crosshair damage feedback is pretty important. I think by default it's on X with shield icon. But what this does, when I shoot a target, you see it makes that little white X. Okay. If I turn this to off, then I shoot a target, that white X is no more. That's important when you're in the heat of battle because you don't want your eyes struggling to find a target. You're muddying up the image here. I'm cluttering it with crap. It's the same thing as a very cluttered set of iron sights. If I have too much on my screen, it can make it hard to track a target. That can be the difference between winning and losing a close fight. The other thing that's very important here is your damage numbers. Stacking is by far the most superior option here. You can't have it off because you have to be able to make call outs to your team. You have to know how weak somebody is, and you're not going to know that unless you have numbers. And if you have it on anything else, we have the same problem that our damage crosshair feedback has, but even worse. So all of the other ones, both for example, as you can see, the numbers float above their head and the big number to their side, the cumulative number. And so that can clutter up things for my screen. And that's specifically going to harm you in your ability to track or your ability to determine how many people are in that area. So I just like to have it on stacking. That's the most cleanest. You get one set of numbers that pop up and you're good to go. Ping opacity is a really big one. I'm not sure most people know that this exists, but by default, ping opacity means if my teammate is pinging, or my teammate is spam pinging, you know how some of those teammates are, right? They go down and they spam ping. This full color is going to stay there no matter what, right? But if I put faded, what happens when I aim down sight is they go away. They just disappear. Yeah, they're very faintly there, but no way do they obstruct my vision at all, right? So that is the best setting for that, and that's why. Obituaries doesn't matter. Minimap, you want that to rotate. You don't want to have to think about where you are and orient yourself. Minimap rotation is just a simple way to navigate. It's like a compass. It turns with you. Weapon auto cycle on empty. That's preference. I don't really care because I'm so used to slapping my weapon slots on my keyboard. Doesn't matter that much. Whatever you prefer. I like auto sprint on. Not a lot of people like auto sprint on. Okay, that I would say is preference. Personally, I would rather crouch walk. I would rather do something else. I'm not the guy that's going to walk up on a fight a whole lot. So auto sprint being on just makes it a little easier for me to have better movement in combat. Jetpack control. This only applies to Valkyrie. Okay, I like hold. Again, that's preference. I don't think that matters very much. Incoming damage feedback. I like 3D. I haven't really played anything else, so I'm not sure. Maybe I'll try that, but 3D works fine. There's a big circle on your screen, okay, and the arrow will appear on that circle wherever the damage is coming from. So if it's at the bottom, it means damage is coming from behind you. If it's at the right side of that circle, the red circle, it means the damage is coming from the right, and so on. So taking damage closes death box or crafting menu. I have that as off. The first time you start armor swapping, you're going to want to turn this off. I think it's by default. I think it might be on by default. I can't remember. But But the first time you start armor swapping, you're going to want this off because there's going to be times where you're trying to swap an armor while being shot at, and it won't let you because it keeps kicking you out of the box when you get hit, and you're just going to die. You have no chance then. I probably recommend for most people keeping their performance display on. It's a very small thing in the top right of your screen there. It shows your FPS, your ping. And I think that's kind of important to get a good feel for the performance of your computer and dial that in. And it'll also let you know, if I hop into a server in ranked mode at the high end and I get on a 100 ping server, I do have to play just slightly differently than if I get a server with 10 ping. It's just a good thing to keep in mind, but you don't have to have that up at all. That's not going to impact your performance. Colorblind modes, I don't really mess with any of these. Some people like to do, I believe it's deuteranopia, and that is because it changes their crosshair color. So if you struggle seeing the red dot, you may want to look at changing your crosshair color. Mess around with these, see what you like. But I personally don't have trouble with any of that, so I just keep my colorblind mode off. But it is a very popular setting. Next, we're going to move on over to bindings. If you're on controller, here's the thing with controller. You can skip this section, but I just want to pop this in here real quick. You need to think about having your crouch slide and your jump in an easily accessible way. If that means you claw grip, great. If that means you have paddles, great. If not, figure out a button configuration that will allow you to crouch and jump without lifting your finger off your aiming stick. Because if you have to lift your finger off of aiming to jump or slide or something of that nature, you're not going to be as effective in combat, I promise you. So figure that out. Whatever you decide is your preference, but figure that out. Okay, so these binds right now are they're relevant, but there's a couple caveats in here that I will cover as we go through this. Most of these are the default, okay? The only thing I believe that I've changed, I like my crouch to be hold. I do not like toggle crouch. I think it leaves room for error. I think if you want good movement, holding crouch is going to be a little better for you. My jump, I have to scroll wheel down. That's kind of important for some of the more advanced movements to make it a little easier and simpler. And then the one that's a little weird, but probably will get fixed at some point, is tap strafing. So right now my mouse scroll upwards is W, which if you're not familiar with tap strafing, we'll cover in a later video, but don't worry about this. If not, it's probably going to get fixed because technically it's not a design function. I'm trying to think what else I've changed here. My aim down side, I like it to be hold. If you play on toggle, I think you're a weirdo. Melee, I have melee on one of my side mouse buttons, just so it is a little easier for me to remember. I don't have to reach for a key or anything like that. I can just tap it while I'm, in close quarter combat battle. But you do you. I don't think that's really a super important thing. My ping, I actually think this one's important to make sure that you have your ping button easily accessible. One of the negatives about being on controller, for example, is that the ping button is kind of out of the way. I think by default, it's your D-pad up, your up arrow. And that makes a lot of controller players unable to ping because they have to lift off of their joysticks to press that. And what happens is they're not able to give their teammates really effective pings. So I make my ping the middle click on my mouse. That way, while I'm shooting or dealing with a target, I can tap that. And it's no impact to what I'm doing. And it gives that information to my team. Other than that, everything else is kind of your personal preference. Unless you do something weird in here, it's not that big of a deal, right? If you prefer to have for example, my crouch, I like my crouch to be left shift. But what I've also done is I mapped my caps lock key to be left shift. So I actually crouch using caps lock, which is very weird. I don't know many people that do that, but that's what's comfortable for me. That's what works for me. So it doesn't really matter, right? It's not impacting my gameplay to reach for caps lock instead of shift or C. I think it makes me feel better and I like it. We'll cover sensitivity and ADS sensitivity in a later video. That's all personal, and I'll kind of show you how to get through all that. Controller, your controller things, again, similar as mouse and key. My crouch button should be hold. I think if you want superior movement, it has to be on hold. Oh my God, people are spamming in there. Your aim, I also think that it has to be on hold. Other than that, everything else is pretty personal, and I will cover finding your perfect sensitivity and such in another video, okay? Video is where we get to kind of explore the benefits of having a PC and changing things in a way that is meaningfully going to help you in your game. Let me get away from these guys all spamming this. So your resolution is going to be totally dependent on what kind of graphics card you have and what kind of monitor you have. So don't worry about that particular setting. Brightness is going to be up to your preference and your monitor. You know, some could argue that different brightnesses look better or whatever, but really it's just personal. It doesn't really matter, right? We're not doing color accurate work here. We're playing a video game, so your preference is your preference. Field of view. Field of view is kind of important. I know everybody on console is really excited because they want a field of view slider. They want to play on it as high as possible. Field of view is a combination of what is the easiest to shoot at your targets and what gives you the most peripheral vision information. Okay. I think that 100 is a very good happy medium. I find that if you go to 110 or even 120, which you can do in some advanced settings, what happens is the screen kind of fisheyes a little bit, and it makes it a little more difficult for you to build really good muscle memory and snap to targets around your screen. As well as also it makes your targets pretty small. This game was designed on a system that did not have as high of a field of view. So 100 is already above that. And again, it's just a good happy medium. This is one of those settings that I think you should stand still, pick the one you like, and then don't change it unless you hate it. If you mess with this setting a lot, it's got potential to mess up your aiming for a little while until you adjust to it. So figure it out, set it and forget it, right? I like 100, but you do you. Field of view ability scaling. This is one you want disabled. This is going to help you not have a weird experience shooting while you're Octane Stim or while you're Bloodhound Ultimate. Okay. If you leave this enabled, what this means is when you Octane Stim or you Bloodhound Ultimate, your field of view is actually going to change. And so what a lot of people experience is they can't hit their shots when they're Octane Stim or their Bloodhound Ultimate because their field of view is changing from what they're used to. It's terrible. I leave that off. I don't want my field of view to change. I want to play on what I'm adjusted to. Sprint view shake, you have to put this on minimal. You have to. If you don't put this on minimal, you're going to run around and your whole screen's going to vibrate. And it's going to be terrible. These are the important settings for performance, and I'm going to briefly cover why, okay? VSync, you want off. If you need to cap your FPS, you can actually put in the launcher of Steam or Origin and tell the game to cap your FPS to your screen's refresh rate. Do not use VSync. Do not use G-Sync. Don't use any of that. It actually adds input delay. Input delay is when I press the button on my mouse, how fast does the game react? When I have VSync or G-Sync on, the game reacts a little slower. They've gotten better, but still there's no reason for you to use this instead of just capping your frame rate, okay? If you have a NVIDIA card, you will want to run Reflex on enabled plus boost. It helps your game respond faster. They work very, very hard with these game developers to make sure that there is actually a benefit. It's not perfect, but it does work in Apex. Adaptive resolution FPS target. Probably don't use this unless you have to. If you have a lower end machine and you're having trouble keeping a high number of FPS, maybe do this. But I would be careful because you don't really want your resolution dropping because it can make it harder for you to see targets and identify them. So really, I would drop other settings before I would drop your resolution like that. Anti-aliasing. This is a big thing here. So the caveat here, some of these settings are to gain you more FPS stability. If you're having trouble keeping your refresh rate tied to your FPS, so if I'm running around town and my FPS is dipping below my refresh rate, this is an important setting for you. This needs to be off. Anti-aliasing is very taxing to your graphics card. If I leave this on, my frame rate is a lot more likely to dip up and down depending on what's on my screen. That's something you don't really want. You want your FPS to be as stable as possible because every FPS feels slightly different. And in a high intensity situation, you might fuck up because that FPS feels slightly different. And you're not really going to know why something feels wrong or inconsistent with your gameplay. This happens a lot in close quarter combat. Somebody runs up close to you, your frame rate drops, and you have trouble because at close quarters, it looks like they're kind of skipping a little bit more and it's harder to track. And it's just a whole ordeal. You're better off having this off if your frame rate suffers. Texture streaming budget. These, I would say your texture streaming budget depends on your preference and your frame rate. If you can hold your frame rate having a very high or extreme texture streaming budget, do you. Right? Do you. I can hold my frame rate running very high. This means that everything else kind of works in my favor, and I'll show you this, okay? Texture filtering doesn't seem to impact your GPU performance a whole lot, so it's not that big a deal, and I think it adds a small amount of beautification to the game, so I leave this fairly high. Ambient occlusion quality. This is not something that you visually notice a whole lot unless you're like standing and staring at shadows. Other than that, I believe it's only shadows for ambient occlusion quality. But other than that, this is not a setting you're really going to notice, truly. Sun shadow, spot shadow, all of this. Shadows are something that are not a great idea to run in a competitive shooter because a shadow, your eye as a human catches movement. Okay. If I leave a lot of shadows on, that clutters my screen with other things that maybe somebody could hide in a shadow, or a shadow moves because, oh, I have that pretty setting on. Your game will look better with those on. But if you have those on and you have an enemy on your screen and your eye is starting to blank out movement because you see moving shadows, or maybe your enemy is hiding in a shadow, that could be a potential kill that you missed or potential way that you die. So if you're serious about being as good as possible, all of your shadows and volumetric lightings, these things should all be disabled. It's tough to justify using these because we're not in this game to look pretty. This is not a game where we're looking at the sky going, wow, look how beautiful it is. I would run these off no matter how good my graphics card is because this could impact me getting that kill or dying. Model detail, effects detail, impact marks, and ragdolls. These are your preference. Again, if you're having trouble holding your frames, you might want to drop these, but if you're not having trouble and you want to turn those up, turn them up. It doesn't really matter. I like these low and off. I don't feel like they impact the visuals of my game a whole lot. And I really just want to make sure that my frame rate stays capped. So I turn these low and off. This is just my preference there. But you should always prioritize frame rate. Always prioritize your frame rate. Audio is mostly up to you. Okay. The only things that I would suggest in audio that can impact things, turn your dialogue volume very, very low. This is the volume of the characters talking because, damn, man, they walk around and say some dumb shit for no reason. And I don't know why. Music volume, same thing. I don't really want any music cluttering sound, screwing up my teammates' voice while I'm trying to drop in or loading in or whatever. I just like those off. The dialogue, I think, is probably the most impactful thing because your characters will say a lot of things in the game. And if you have those high, I promise they're going to scream in your ear. I don't know why the game is designed that way, but it is. So you'll probably want those off. Everything else, not that important. Everything else is kind of up to you. These are the settings that will help you perform your best in Apex. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. We're going to be doing a whole lot of these kind of videos. Thank you guys.